Thank you all so much for joining us for this resume or CV, how to create them and when to use the workshop. Joining us today are Barry Sager, Goals Coach at US Bank, Dr. Darren Vetter, Career and Professional Development Specialist at UNLV Career Services, Eric McMahon, Career and Professional Development Specialist at UNLV Career Services, Tim Buchanan, Assistant Director at the UNLV Writing Center, and Kevin Bloom, Lead Writing Consultant at the UNLV Writing Center. So just to give you an overview of today's workshop, we're going to start by hearing from Eric and Darren. They're going to do a brief presentation to give us an overview about resumes and CVs. And then for the rest of the workshop, we're going to go ahead and transition into the panel portion where we'll open it up for questions, anything that you might want our panelists to answer. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hand it over to Eric and Darren.
All right, perfect. That's our introductory slide. So appreciate the invite from everybody here. And I see some familiar faces on here, so this should be a lot of fun today. Actually, encourage you guys, if you have questions, please put those over in the chat. On this slide here, I'll go back to that second one. There you go. So if you guys have a Handshake account, which I hope you all do, if you can take your phone out, hopefully this will work. It worked the other day, but a couple students had problems with it. If you take a picture of that QR code, it should register in your phone, and that should register you for Handshake and give you credit for attending this today. So we could take about a minute to give everybody a chance. Hopefully this works. We had a couple people the other day doing one of these that it didn't work, but it worked for a lot of people. Because it's very likely we're going to mention a career fair that's coming up right around the corner too, on the 8th, 9th, and 10th. Perfect, positive, we're good. Okay, group, so we have Writing Center friends here with us. Kevin and Timothy are here. So the Writing Center location and hours is listed here. Tim, if you or Kevin want to pipe in on this, you guys can, so feel free to.
Tim, do you want me to say a little bit about the hours and stuff, or would you like to? All right, sure. So our hours are listed as you see here. We've actually adjusted our hours a little bit from the previous semester to have increased virtual availability. Regardless of whether you make a virtual or in-person consultation, I would highly recommend that you guys make an appointment and try to schedule as far in advance as possible, because we do get pretty booked, especially at this point in the semester. So that's my recommendation for now.
I would also like to just quickly highlight, we do have an online submission portal for our online writing lab. So, you know, for works like resumes, CVs and stuff like that, you can submit those to us electronically and we will give feedback on them. We won't edit them for you, but we'll give you feedback and then send them back to you.
Okay, next. So here's our office, Career Services. We are in SSC-A, so we're on the second floor, room 201. We're open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and then Tuesdays and Wednesdays we do have walk-ins. So if any students, depending on what your schedule is, if you just want to come in and see a career coach, we're there from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with walk-in hours on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The phone number is there. So we're in the funny building with the middle part of it is round. And ironically, the Writing Center, the good thing for us is they are not very far away from us. So they're kind of across the way. And so they're not too far away from us. So they're our friends. We get to go hang out with them every now and then when we get time. So next one. So let's get into this fun. So a resume versus a curriculum vitae. There's several different ways to look at this, but what the resume really boils down to, it's a 1 to 2 page document, and it's really your professional identity. So it's relevant academic, professional, volunteer, leadership experience, and it's kind of more or less a highlight film is what it is. The word resume, actually, it means summary. So when you think of a resume compared to a curriculum vitae, they're two different documents. We still at Career Services will encourage you to keep your resume down to one page, which we'll go over. We've had discussions over the past several weeks. We had a lot of students that bring in a really great resume, and it's got a lot of different colors on it, and it's got a picture of themselves on it, and those are all outstanding. But the problem is right now is probably over 90% of the companies, when they're looking at resumes, they're going through an electronic scanner. So when you think about it, there's tricks that we have on ways to format a resume, which make it, when it goes in that system to get scanned, it's going to pick out keywords and key identifiable information that's going to get picked up, hopefully, so you get picked for an interview. And that's the whole goal with the resume. The curriculum vitae, this is an academic document. It focuses on teaching, research, service, relevant experience, items like if you did research with a professor for a semester, or if you worked on some major research project in any type of class or whatever, this is where this goes. The CV is longer, it's more focused, and it's utilized for academic purposes. So grad school, scholarships, research activities, etc. I had a conversation with a colleague last week too, that they said now the curriculum vitae too is becoming popular in medical field. So in the medical field, they're going to be very curious about your background of research. And this is where research can really pop up, and where we really want to show your research is on the curriculum vitae. So the opposite, the Latin word for curriculum vitae means a course of life. So summary for a resume, course of life for a curriculum vitae. So next slide, please. So resume section and design. A key point that I put down at the bottom of this one, there is no such thing as a perfect resume. So people are allowed to be very flexible in their design and their layout. The main sections you want: contact information, very simple, very accurate, very professional; academic, where you went to school at, when you graduated. If your GPA is 3.0 or higher, we encourage you to put that on there. And if you did a special section of coursework. Professional experience, so this is all your professional work, companies, organizations, places that you worked at. We encourage students, when they put these down, if there's 2 or 3 key points that they did. So say they might have done some special training, say they manage people, say they helped develop something, that's where you put that information. Volunteer experience has become very popular. We like to see volunteer experience on there. It tells us that, hey, these potential employees, they go the extra mile. Leadership, in what we see a lot out of students in school is that they're involved in student organizations and things like that, and they will pick up quite a bit of leadership experience. Awards and activities are always good to list. Skill section can be something that's really expanded upon too. You can list your skills on the computer side, any special programs that you use in school, any ability with customer service that you learned, human resources type stuff you might have picked up in work. There's different things like that. The design, so you want to keep a resume consistent and pretty clear and pretty concise. No tiny font, no 8, 9, whatever font. So try to stay between 10 and 11. Really, if you can go to font 12, go to font 12. Use bold on the job titles and the section headings, and make sure it's aligned. Make sure it looks neat and it looks clean. And the reason why we encourage that is because it's going into a machine that's going to scan it. So when you have resumes that are all over the place, because I've seen some really nice resumes, they're really nice, but like the left side was a section, and that section was all this work information that went up and down, and that doesn't work out when the thing hits the machine. So keep those in mind. So next one. So contact information. So this slide, we can go through this pretty quick. So it's not a legal document. A resume is not. You can use any name of your choice. If you want to put your middle name on there, you can do that. So if you look at the bottom part of this already, it's very simple. So we got Joe Smith, Las Vegas, Nevada. There's the phone number and the email. The email address is always encouraged to be something with your first and last name if you have it. Your UNLV email is going to be perfect. City and state is fine. You no longer need your full street address or whatever. That's not really required on a resume anymore. And then phone number. Anybody know anybody that has a voicemail that's not set up? Because I do. I think everybody does. So when you get to this point of your life, make sure you set up your voice message on your cell phone or on your home phone or wherever, so people can call you back and leave a message. So next slide. So the education section, so list the schools that you've attended, list the location of these institutions. You don't need websites anymore. I've seen people put websites for the school down, and they don't really need those anymore. The date of graduation, and so the way the school goes, it's going to be listed on the left side of the document. On the right is where we put the date. You can make dates very simple now. If you put May of 2025, we know that's your estimated graduation date. We see people write the word estimated on there. They don't need to do that anymore. We know what May 2025 is. It's 3 years down the road. The degrees that you learned, the GPA, if you're still in college, and after graduation, it's not important, but if they're over 3.0, you're encouraged to put those down. Relevant coursework that adds to your qualifications. So like I mentioned earlier, when you're on education, if you did some like really great research projects or really interesting projects with any type of degree program that you're in, you're encouraged to list those also. The whole thing with the resume that we encourage is to be one page. And so where some of these things, like you could probably list 8 or 10 things that you did in education, but the problem you lose is space. And so that's kind of the one little battle that we have with the resume is fighting space. So language or technical skills, that also adds to your qualifications, especially if you speak multiple languages, make sure you include that somewhere on the resume. Next one. So here's a quick sample of the education section. So you can see Bachelor of Arts. Education is in all caps, it's in bold and it's underlined. So you can see how Bachelor of Arts is in bold. The education or the graduation date is over on the right. Below that, the Associates of Arts, that's another example. That date is right below it, which is fine, College of Southern Nevada. And then relevant coursework there is listed. And then below that, a BS in engineering or BS in psychology. So the reason why those are all in bold, the relevant coursework's in bold because you want the scanner to pick it up. The degrees are all in bold because you want those to be picked up. And then we got University of Nevada, Las Vegas on the bottom of that one. So next slide. So what counts as professional experience? So your most relevant professional experience is going to be in worker activities. So jobs, list those for sure. Internships, volunteer positions, teaching or research assistantships, leadership, membership, and extracurricular activities, and any project experience. So any activities or positions that involve qualifications that are needed for the job you're applying for. These are what's listed as professional experience. Like I said, there's no perfect resume, so you can list these in any way or any shape that you want to do it. I like to separate out volunteer because I think volunteer is special. I like to bold the word volunteer on there because I know the scanners will pick that up too. So next one. So what does your experience do? It describes that your skills. So when you list all that information of where you worked at, when the machine and eventually hopefully a human being is going to read that resume when they interview you, they're going to look at that. So you don't want an information dump of your job duties. You want to highlight the main things that you've done. So experience and achievements are the main things that you're looking for. This helps your resume stand out, and this will actually save some time for the reviewer. So that way they can look at it. It's establishing your unique professional identity. One thing that I'll mention again is the career fair. So it's coming up the 8th, 9th, and 10th. So we have over 150 businesses that are going to be there for those 3 days. And when those recruiters are standing there and a student comes up and gives them a resume and they look at it, typically they're not going to have a ton of time to look at it, but hopefully they will have a couple minutes. And in a couple of minutes on a good resume, they can scan through it and they can pick out all the highlights and all the main things. Work experience, education experience, and they'll always look at the skills or volunteer on there too. So next slide. So, and here's a couple examples. I know these are a little bit harder to see, but the main focus here is kind of look at the layout and how the layout is done. And once again, look at what's bolded, what information is included, and how these two different layouts are done. The great thing that we have for everyone at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and for all the alumni and all of our military is that on our career services website, we have a career toolkit. And in that career toolkit, there are several examples of resumes and cover letters. And one of those things is called a vault. And I think there's literally as many as 100 different resumes that are in there. And some of them are specific to jobs. So jobs like education, accounting, biology, things like that. There is a bunch of examples. So we have that available to everyone. Next one. So here's some quick takeaways from the resume part. So review the job posting. So everyone is encouraged now to have your resume look similar to what the job posting is. Circle the skills on the job posting, the knowledge, and those things that you need. You want to match your resume the best that you can to the job posting. Identify the requirements that you do not meet, but you might have really similar experiences, so you can kind of tailor it towards that. Identify your strongest matches, tailor those descriptions. Remember, the resume is going to get you the interview, and then in the interview, you get to elaborate on all your skills and experience. 80% of the language on resumes should match the position you're applying for. Keep your organization, if you're heading, strategic, and then give yourself enough time to write and edit those descriptions. So I know it becomes a lot of work when you think about all this, but if you're making a resume and a cover letter for a specific job, you're going to have a lot of save as, because you're going to have a lot of versions of the resume, and you're going to have those on your computer because they're going to match the jobs that you're applying for. So next one. Now it's Eric.
All right, thanks, Darren. That was a great review on resume. And I'm going to go over 2 slides on the CV, the curriculum vitae, and then bring us home with the presentation. So as Darren had alluded to earlier, there's some subtle differences in the resume and CV. Primarily, the CV is an academic document. I'd like to think of it as and describe it as an academic record. It's a living document. It's not limited to 2 pages. It can, I've seen some between 5, depending on experience level, all the way up to 15 to 20 pages for your more senior and honorary type instructors or professors. So you see the list here, similar to before. It's a comprehensive statement, educational background. Research is a big part of the CV that separates itself from the resume. Also, not listed on here are various publications. So if you're all in grad school, so if you're interested in pursuing a terminal degree or doctorate level, you may have various publications or presentations that you'll want to list on there and add to every year. So as you can imagine, someone pursuing a PhD would have a pretty extensive list from all of the documentation and research and activities that they're involved with. It also describes your experiences similar to a resume. It has the look and feel of a resume. Again, no page limit. We list accomplishments and any language or technical skills that you may have that may enhance qualifications. And that's the big difference there is enhancing the qualifications and showcasing your whole portfolio in a few pages. 2 good points here when creating your CV, talk to your colleagues. I've been in classes where, in graduate courses where the professor freely shares their CV for modeling, for reference, and that's done across academia, and I highly encourage those that are going on to pursue a terminal degree or field in academia to consult your colleagues. There's the point here about formatting. That was covered a lot with earlier, as Darren alluded to the resume area. It's almost the same. You want to take care of your sections, make sure everything's represented and in that right format. And there's a lot of folks. There's us at the Career Center, and there's your own departments and respective programs that can assist you with that. Next slide, please. Okay, here's your sections. A common with the resume would be your heading, which lists your contact information, education, experience. Again, what separates the CV are publications, presentations. You all are in graduate programs and involved and probably required to attend professional development conferences. You may present or compete in presentations at those conferences. You want to list those. Any type of postering, oral presentations, defenses that you, obviously the dissertation defense you'll want to list as well in the education section. Honors and awards, that looks similar to a resume, but will be a pretty extensive list as your career develops. And references are a lot of times, or most times, added to the CV, which again it would look like a separate document with the resume, and upon request from an employer after or during an interview process. Grants you may have received, very, very, very important there. All professional organizations, community involvement, and of course certifications depending on your field of study. And that's really it for CVs. I didn't bring an example today. If you would like to see an example, feel free to email myself or Darren. I would feel that if maybe one or two of you on the call here may be interested in going on in academia and pursuing that route, so please keep us informed of that process when you start to really dive in and develop your CV. Next slide, please. Okay, Darren had mentioned career fairs. That is coming up next week, I believe. Yep, 8th through the 10th. So you'll see that we have a 3-day career fair. You all are graduate students, and depending on how far along you are in your program, we highly suggest that you attend in person. I know that we have a record number of employers this year ending, and a lot of that is kind of on the tail end of the pandemic. A lot of employers are starting to show back up, show interest in in students, and you know, there's a ton of, quite frankly, there's a ton of jobs open right now as a result. So we highly encourage you to attend March 8th for Law and Public Services. All industry fair open to everyone on March 9th, and then your STEM disciplines, science, tech, engineering, and mathematics on March 10th. And you all are aware by now of Handshake and how to connect with those employers. We advise you go on and look at that list of employers and kind of come up with a game plan of how you'd like to approach that if you do plan to attend. But that should be the final slide. Nevena, if we want to open it up for questions for our part.
Thank you so much, Darren and Eric, for that presentation. So to kind of recap a little bit and just to transition us into that panel portion of today, can you all give us your thoughts on the primary goal of a resume versus CV? And you can speak on one or both of these, depending on your background with them. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to Barry first for this one.
Sure, thanks so much. And I'll admit a lot more of my experiences with working with resumes as compared to CVs. But as Darren highlighted, I would say resumes are really an opportunity to highlight your experiences and accomplishments professionally or in academia, and you're really hitting a concise document. One page is preferred, I think, in most cases. Maybe you can extend it to 2 pages, but what I find is the resume is really that opportunity to highlight and focus and use accomplishments that you've had along the way. The partner oftentimes with the resume is the cover letter, and similar to what was mentioned with the CV, that's more of a chance to expand and speak a little bit more around like your personality and an introduction to yourself, and maybe speak to more of your experience and those types of things. So I would say, coming back to the resume, really focus on keeping that concise, and then again, using the cover letter to go along with that to expand a lot on your professional resume experiences.
Thank you. Tim, did you have anything to add?
Absolutely. I agree with a lot of what was said here, especially like while 2 pages is kind of like allowable in certain cases, like really working on keeping that resume as concise as possible. And also making those discrete sections that make it a really sort of scannable document, both scannable by the software that's going to be looking at it first and the human that's going to be looking at it second. For resumes, I really see them as a way to demonstrate very quickly how you as a person fit the opportunity that you're applying to. The main purpose of a resume is never to get a job, but to get an interview, to get you in front of a person where you can elucidate on your skills, like expand on those. The difference that I feel with the CV is that it is a demonstration of what you have done in this field that you have essentially decided to make the course of your life, right? What have you been involved in? What sort of research or publication have you done? I also include in certain CVs for myself my particular areas of interest for research, what things I kind of like want to do in the future or am doing, what projects do I have in progress at the moment, to really demonstrate that you are like as full a member as possible of this academic community that you are essentially dedicating yourself to.
Thanks, Tim. Kevin?
Yeah, I think that you guys touched on some really great points. I guess my advice is kind of similar in that, well, first I see Scarlett has a question in the chat, and this is what I was going to mention is that resumes are, I speak for myself, I'm sure I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but when you are making a resume, I'd like to generally suggest that the document is tailored for the specific job you are applying for. With the CV, you're a little bit more flexible in that I like to think of it as a sort of catalog of everything that you've done. A resume, as Darren and Tim and others have mentioned, is supposed to be sort of a summary presented and tailored to a particular prospective employer, right? And now with the CV, because you can have pretty much as many pages as you need, what that also means is you can talk about things that span a much greater period of time. And so I think that that is also one of the key distinctions, is that a resume, you can't talk about everything that you've done. You have to be very selective when making a resume. Yes.
Thanks. For those of you that are going to be watching the recording, the question in the chat was, do you suggest to modify resumes based on the job we are applying to? And then I'll hand it over to Eric if you have anything to add.
I would just echo what Tim and Kevin had mentioned. It's and then offer another little bit of information. I heard once that hiring managers and those that are responsible for looking at resumes spend a grand total of 8 to 10 seconds on average in looking at a resume. Don't let that scare you, or the talk about this machine that we put your resumes through. It's not a big scary process. It's a common process, but as Scarlett had asked in the question, resumes are a quick view of your a lot of times your most recent experience and relevant experience. So you yes, you do want to tailor that resume to every single job you apply to, and you want to speak to the language that the job description is speaking to. So job qualifications, responsibilities, tasks, duties. There's keywords embedded in that language, in those points and those tasks and activities that they list. So you definitely want to find common words, common phrases to match your experience or to translate your experience into, we call it transferable skills, if you're seeking something similar to what you've done, or if you're entering a new career field. So yes, that's a great question and very important.
Thanks, Eric. And Darren.
Yeah, just to follow up, I mean, as Eric mentioned, the CV can be extremely long, but there's things that like students will do different things, especially like in graduate school. If they're working on a project with a professor, and say they're working on a project such as like biology, it's going to be hard for them to briefly explain what the project is. And it could be something that lasts a year with the professor. It could be something that lasts a year and a half. It could lead to publication. But that's why the CV is going to be way longer, because they're going to want to put in a good description of what actually happened, what the results are. Publications, especially, you want to put what journal you're published in, or who you're published with, if you co-wrote it. So that's why the CV, it really is more like it's what it says. It's like a life story is what it is. But that's when you really get to explain. The resume's short and sweet and quick, but that CV, that really gives you time. I've read some great CVs in my life. I've read some that are so interesting. I always question where people get the time, because after you read 6 pages of what these people have done, or professors or whoever they are, it's amazing the things that they've done. So
thank you. I think I saw Tarisha, you had your hand raised. Did you want to ask a question?
I did. First, thanks everyone for the information. I had seen that Tim in the chat talked about also suggesting modifying your CV based on the opportunity you're applying to. So even though it's like the same information, because I've heard about like a research institution versus a teaching institution. So what are you highlighting first and foremost, right? If you have teaching versus research experience. So I was going to ask about that, but then, so if folks had something to speak on that, that'd be great. But I did see that Tim mentioned also modifying the CV in that regard as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind talking about that for a second, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I love, this is going to be when I nerd out just a little bit. One of the things I love about resumes and CVs is their modular quality. And what I mean by that is how each of these documents is made up of discrete sections. They're nicely labeled. Everything that needs to go under them is gathered under them in this way that you can kind of just pick up a section and move it somewhere else in the document. So when I talk about modifying a CV or a resume, what I typically mean is moving the portion so that the most relevant information comes the soonest. With a CV, I think pretty much your education is always going to be that first thing. Obviously, there might be some exceptions, but for the most part, that's going to be the first thing. And then depending, like let's say you are applying for a teaching position versus a research position, you would maybe emphasize anything that looks like teaching that you've done. But if you are applying for that research position, you might move that teaching further down in order to talk about both like research projects that you've done, what have you researched in the field, what are your particular research interests in that field, you know, what publications do you have based on research, et cetera, and then maybe at the bottom, if you have teaching experience there, or, you know, under all of that, then you have like, here's my teaching experience in the field. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for clarifying, because I did not know the difference between a research or a teaching job when I first started. So I'm learning all of those differences.
Absolutely. And like has been said before too, I love what Darren said, that the CV is a living document. So these documents do change and grow over time, and you might even find yourself reordering things over time.
Thank you so much, Tim. So does the use or preference of either a CV or resume vary by industry? And can you give us a few examples where one or the other would be used, maybe depending on area or industry? And I'll just open it up to whoever wants to take that first.
I mean, a lot of my background is more in like the professional field, not necessarily working in the academic world. And so in that space, CVs really aren't that common. I think they are more set aside for research or teaching types of positions or opportunities. So if the scope of your job search looks like that, it might be, let's say, just more in like, let's say, corporate positions or nonprofits or something along those lines, I would say chances are pretty good that your hiring manager, your employer is going to be looking more for a resume and a cover letter for those types of opportunities. I mean, I've been working for over 20 plus years, and I've never had anybody ask for a CV just from that standpoint. So not to say that it couldn't come up at some point, but I think and maybe somebody else on the panel would correct me too, but I think CVs are going to be much more of a unique or for more of those specific types of university / research / teaching types of positions.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, agreed with what Barry said. And if you look at it, the CV, it's going to really focus more on education. I mean, like right now, if you're applying for a job at a major research institution, which we are now, we're Research One, right? You'll want to include that information, and the CV is the way to do that. The resume really is kind of more of a business type document, where the CV right now, it does focus more towards education, research, and like I mentioned earlier too, I had a great conversation with a colleague last week about medical, and it makes total sense that if you're applying for med school right now, a CV may work way better to have that information on what your research goals are, especially because medical schools always care about what you want to research going forward. You want to look at cancer? Do you want to look at something specific? And that's where I think the difference is.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions coming in on my chat here. Does anyone on the panel have words of advice for those of us who are big doers but terrible about keeping track or talking about ourselves?
I mean, I can definitely talk about some brainstorming strategies. One of the things that I was suggesting to a friend of mine who's working on personal statements for grad school and things like that, it can be difficult to talk about yourself. One of the things that you might try is trying to talk about yourself in the third person. On paper, use your name and say like, in 2019, Tim became the president of this student organization and did these things, blah, 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 just as a brainstorming tool to try to imagine yourself as a character that you're writing about, in sort of decentering yourself from the things that you've done to kind of get a sort of objective bird's eye view of the things you've done, your accomplishments, just to get a list of them out on paper before you even think about like where these things are going to go in a CV or resume, and just try to basically collect all these shiny objects of your accomplishments so that you can look at them in a slightly more objective fashion.
Thank you, Tim. Barry, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I would definitely identify somebody like a trusted individual, whether it's like a partner or maybe it's a friend or a neighbor or maybe it's a colleague, and have somebody really go over your resume or your CV with you and almost interview based on the information that you've outlined. This is the process that I've gone through before, and it was basically because it's one of the things I dislike the most is just talking about myself or talking about what I've done, and in going through a document like a resume with somebody that you trust and that will give you feedback. It's a way to really not necessarily spin your information in a way that's untrue, but it's really expand and highlight it more, where you can maybe just get some more assistance just talking about your past and talking about the positives that have happened, and really starting to highlight that. So for me, that I've found that to be a positive, just to open up my mind a little bit more and give me another perspective, I guess, on my experiences, and that way just kind of shape some of the verbiage that I would use on a document like a resume.
Thank you, Barry. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. So I had kind of a similar point that was being made. In my experience, one of the reasons that people have been afraid to talk about themselves in resumes, CVs, or cover letters is because they're worried about sounding braggadocious or arrogant. I find like that is one of the key worries that writers have. And one thing that I find sort of helps with this is, like Barry said, to kind of have a trusted person, look at it and see if, if you are being arrogant, or if, you're being respectful about your accomplishments in a very, humble way. But also, I think that another strategy that's overlooked is to sort of just kind of realize that this is a competition, right? Like, you are going to be competing against other people, right? So if you don't try to, make yourself sound as qualified as possible, someone else out there is going to beat you essentially, and then they will get the interview or the position, right? So when I tell writers that, they kind of reframe their mindset and like, oh yes, I'm not the only one who's applying for this. There's going to be other people. I need to make myself stand out, right? So there is a fine line between sounding arrogant and braggadocious and just, hey, I'm qualified for this.
It's a really great point, Kevin. Thank you. Kind of following up with this, the next question in the chat was, today's branding is challenging with lots of fluff out there. Are there things to avoid to sound like a marketing ad? I'll hand this over first to Darren if you want to have a stab at that.
I don't even know how to tackle this one. So we encourage students to have their elevator pitch ready. So I see what they mean by the branding, and yeah, you don't want to you want to make it sound good, but like even back to the last topic, what we encourage is practice. So we offer practice for interviews. We offer an electronic thing that students can practice interviews on. So we encourage practicing, but you do want to come up with your elevator pitch, and you do want to have your brand put together. The career fairs is an example. When a student walks up, and I've done career fairs from the business side, I did those for several years. And when I was there, I had students that would come up to me to introduce themselves. They'd hand me their resume, and they had an elevator pitch ready. So, and they encourage them to be as long as a minute, maybe a minute and a half. But they would say, "Hi, I'm so and so. I have this experience from school. I have this experience from work. I was a manager. I was a leader." And their pitch is put together, and you could tell they practiced it. But that's kind of what it's put together. Career fairs are the same way. When they mention 8 or 10 seconds to look at a resume, career fairs, there's going to be a lot of employers here. There's going to be a ton of students that we already have registered. But that elevator pitch and kind of the brand of what you put together is something that should be practiced and be put together with some organization. And I think it just only helps. You can tell when you're an employer and you have students that come up that are prepared, it makes a huge difference when you're meeting 30 or 50 of them in one day. And Barry may be able to comment back on some of that with his experience.
Well, I'll chime in going back to what Kevin mentioned. I mean, the resume and again, going back to a cover letter, this is your opportunity to sell yourself. I mean, you, as has been mentioned, you're competing against other people. You just have to assume that's going to be the case. And you don't know how much attention is going to be paid to your documentation, unfortunately. So something needs to be that really catches the eye of the individual looking at those documents, and something that's going to draw them to keep reading or expand further, or hopefully reach out to you for an interview. So it is a fine line. You don't want to come across as boasting or bragging, but at the same time, you really need to put yourself out there and sell your qualities and really sell your interest and why you feel that you're the best candidate for whatever position that you're applying for.
Tim?
Started speaking before I unmuted myself. Yeah, I wholly agree with everything that's been said here. And I think going back to the portion of the question about the fluff, like these are effectively marketing tools. You are marketing yourself to someone. So it should, to some degree, act like marketing, but good marketing never feels like marketing, right? So I think when you're writing these things, you want to avoid empty sentiment or empty phrasing, like, self-starter and, like, I work well with the team. Consider the ways you can demonstrate those skills and those qualities through quantifiable experience. When you're talking about things you've done, talk about the numbers that are involved. Like, say, in any sort of service industry job, like, well, how many people do you serve in a day? How large is the team that you lead? How many people? These things that can be counted. I think those are the ways that you kind of like help market yourself. But you're demonstrating qualities rather than like saying, just, simply saying that you have these qualities.
Thank you, Tim. So what are some common mistakes that you have all seen people make when they put together their resume or CV?
I can chime in here, and this is a good follow-on from the last question. The use of extreme language, particularly with the documents, the CV or the resume. As I believe that, as Tim had mentioned, there's ways to approach your own brand and to relay your own experience with your brand in a professional way, without sounding too extreme. Certain examples would be listing your skills on a resume. If you want to talk about customer service, you want to just mention customer service within the parameters and scope of the job and the job description. Use of effective customer service or high level customer service, that may be okay, but any other language and use may be a little bit extreme for some of the resumes. And sometimes we see that and have to adjust that down to sound a little more professional. So and I could probably think of 1,000 other examples, but if you do have a question with your resume and want to see if that type of language may exist on your resume, then feel free to book an appointment with us and we can help you with that.
I'll chime in too. It ties in almost with the branding piece too, but if you're on social media and you're using something like LinkedIn, which is a very popular networking resource, especially if you're looking for job opportunities or connecting with other people in the field, make sure that really syncs up with the information you're providing to a job, or essentially that your resume matches what your LinkedIn profile would look like in that case. And just so there's not any kind of inconsistencies, I would imagine it's pretty common for hiring managers or HR departments to maybe do a quick Google search and see what they can find online prior to interviewing somebody. And so you just want to make sure that the information that you have and that you're marketing yourself with and using to apply for positions is consistent and really lines up across the board in the different ways that a hiring manager will be able to track you down, essentially.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I always talk about with writers is like the way the resume looks on the page. If any of you have a sort of like art background, you can, in a lot of ways, approach it like a piece of art. I tell people sometimes to print out their resume or their CV, set it up on a wall or pin it to a wall and step back. And do things look like they exist in discrete and tidy boxes, or do they kind of look like a series of strange random lines? I see a lot of issues with this where people use like templates, like Microsoft Word templates to create their resumes, when really just like a straightforward across the page, bullet points all in a line. These are the things that we want to see that make a clean design that is compartmentalized and easily scannable by whatever human is going to look at these things. And also people who divide their resumes into columns. I feel like that is a very confusing thing to read and might even confuse that software that's going to be looking at that too.
I guess I can chime in as well. I've had some very similar experiences as well. I think one of the ones that I've noticed is that people try to get too fancy with their resumes, kind of like how Tim was mentioning. The unfortunate reality is that people do use applicant tracking systems, and you do have to make sure your document is readable, which again means that you basically have to, you're limited in how far you can deviate from a standard format, right? With that being said, I think that, you do have a lot of freedom even within that. I think that on the flip side, a lot of people are a little too shy with experimenting with their resumes. Some people, they're afraid to make their name really big on the page, right? But the name is going to be the first thing you see, right? So you don't have to be afraid to put your name in like 20 size font, right? You can do that, absolutely. Play around with your resume, right? So I do encourage experimentation, but do just make sure that for the most part, you're not doing anything crazy like adding photos or doing anything that a machine might not recognize.
Thank you all. So our next question here is, what are some transferable skills that you have kind of seen be most in demand by employers? Some transferable skills that can be relevant to different types of industries or areas.
I can chime in. So I'm not sure how outdated this statistic is necessarily. It's in the UNLV business writing textbook, but there was a statistic that sort of showed that managers spend more time correcting their employees' emails than they do writing their own emails. So writing and communication skills are definitely going to be very important. That's probably one of the top ones that I can think of right off the top of my head. As far as some other ones, I think that teamwork is a good one, right? Which kind of merges a little bit with communication, but being able to work well in a group and to get large projects done. Time management, I think, is going to be very valuable as well. How well do you work under pressure? Can you handle stress? Being very adaptable. Can you, pivot on a dime and do this new thing that we need you to do right now, right? So I think those are some of the ones that I can think of just off the top of my head.
Barry?
That was a great list. Yeah, I would just chime in with a couple of others. I mean, just if we're talking about being willing or having the ability to maybe willing to learn new skills or be willing to adapt. And I have trained stuck in my head. That feels a little too direct, but just the willing to be able to learn and essentially be flexible too, if you're coming into a new environment, and just being able to participate in a fast action environment. I think those are skills that can transfer across the board too. But Kevin provided a great list, very extensive, and I think those are all very relevant skills.
Thank you. And does anyone else want to add any?
Not necessarily a list of skills, but when writing these documents, one of the things that I would, one of the brainstorming tools I would impart is to think about everything that goes into the type of experience you have. For example, like the experience I usually draw from the most is my teaching experience. In that experience, I have managed large groups of people. I have presented and disseminated information to these people. I have delegated tasks. I have reviewed work. All of these things that I do, breaking them down into little pieces can apply to a number of different jobs. Currently, through that teaching experience, I'm working in an administrative position right now, which all of those skills that I used in teaching do apply here. Those skills also apply to supervisory positions or management positions. So just think about like what experiences you have, what all goes into being able to do that thing, and then how can you translate that to make it relevant to the position or opportunity that you're applying for now.
That's a great point. Thank you so much, Tim. So we are about out of time for today's session, but before we end, I just really want to thank all of our panelists for sharing your time, your expertise, everything that you've experienced with us today. And thank you so much for our participants for joining us, for asking questions. Before you all log off, if you don't mind, please taking a couple of minutes just to fill out this very brief workshop feedback survey that I'm going to drop in the chat right now. This just helps us as we plan our next semester and plan for future workshops. So we really appreciate you filling that out. Thank you all so much. Have a good day.